Welcome to the Extra Time Podcast, where you'll hear sports stories you might not have heard about from people you might not have heard of. Let's get into this week's show.
A super September welcome in, and just ahead of us is the last Saturday in September, which if you're an Australian footy fan, it's pretty big. It's grand final week, welcome in. And as always, as your host Aidan Box, I've got my great friend Mark Woods alongside me. Woodsy, how are you going?
I'm going well, super excited for this week, and it's not just the AFL obviously, it's the first Sunday in October, but the NRL Grand Final kicks off as well, so Grand Final weekend.
There's also a lot around the world which we always cover as well. A lot of distance to cover as usual. Sports getting going, sports finishing up, and another World Cup on the horizon as well. And joining us today again, the Mulgrave legend and great friend of the show. He wanted to come back for more today, Woodsy. It's Noah Fisher. Fish, how you going?
Not too bad, Boxy. Pleasure to be back, and can't wait to talk some cricket and English Premier League with you boys.
Well, we better get into it, and we've given it a bit of a pass lately because we were building up to this massive Saturday in September, and what a season it's been in the Australian Football League. And Collingwood and Brisbane, they've made the big dance, and they'll battle it out on Saturday. Boys, what are our initial thoughts here?
Oh, it's a big day. The two teams that finished first and second in their rightful spot. You had Carlton talk. Giants got close, so pretty exciting, and it's hard to pick between these two teams considering their journey.
It's been a few years since we've had this, but yeah, you mentioned first and second, obviously winning themselves into the qualifying finals. Both were they were able to play at home, which obviously for Brisbane and Collingwood with their fan bases is a massive advantage. And yeah, for the first time in a few years, they were able to win their home qualifiers and then win their home prelims. So we are seeing the first versus second battle that I guess is the most favoured going into every final series. We don't always get it, but this year we have, and I think you can definitely say it's said every year at the end of the grand final, but I think you can say going in, these two have been the clear best two teams all year, the clear benchmark. And like you mentioned briefly there, Woodsy, they had a few decent challenges to face. The Pies hosted the Demons in a first versus fourth match in the qualifying final at MCG, and the Demons really cost themselves that one. And we'll go into a bit more of that in the future. But the Pies, as they always do, late game, clutch, really controlled the footy and just let the Demons lose it for them. And then well themselves into a prelim where they got over the Giants by a solitary point, which is a bit of revenge for last year where the other Sydney team, the Fishers Swans, got over them by the same margin up in Sydney. But this time, the Black and White Army got to see their team in front of themselves at the MCG and see them into another grand final, their first since 2018, and their 45th in AFL VFL history, which is quite incredible. For the Lions, they hosted the Port Adelaide Power in the 2v3 matchup in the qualifier at the Gabba, and, well, it's a real masterclass after half-time. I was lucky enough to watch that one, and they just play that sort of footy that's just so great to watch. They've got so many excitement machines up forward, and their midfield was really humming in that one, and that won them into another home prelim, which is pretty much the most anticipated game for Brisbane in a lot of years, just because they're so strong at home and they're so weak, it seems, at the MCG. But they're able to get that home prelim, and it was against Carlton, who really came from nowhere. Them and the Giants really came from nowhere in these finals, and the Blues really put it on them in that first quarter, 5-0. But the Lions, it's the sort of team they are. They've got so much experience now. They coach brilliantly, and they were able to turn the tide completely and dominate that one to see themselves into another grand final. And I think it's their first since 2003, which they played the same opponent.
2004.
2004.
They lost to Port Adelaide.
Oh, they did too.
They were going for the four-peat, not able to do it, but once again, as you mentioned, 2003, they did face Collingwood, so it's that familiar grand final day, or for people who are a bit older.
Like you.
Yeah. 20 years since it happened, so it's very funny. It's exciting stuff.
It's great to see, and yeah, I'll give you a bit of stick for being old there, because in 2003 I was 2 years old at that point, so I can't say I watched much of that game. But what I will say is it'll be really cool after Saturday to compare the two teams from both grand finals in 2003 and then in 2023 and compare them. I know that as a Hawks fan, that 03 Brisbane team gets compared to our 2015 three-peat team. But I think my initial thoughts are, if Brisbane are to win on Saturday, they're definitely in the conversation for the best team in this modern era since 2000. I think 4 premierships just enters you into the conversation immediately. They've played that extra grand final in 2004. 4-peat's nearly impossible to do, but they've been there. And then they'll go up there with Hawthorn, who have also done it, and then the likes of Geelong and Richmond, who have got them, but not quite in a row.
Yeah, well, on that, I think there's a difference between like the great teams and the great clubs. Like the great teams are, you look at the Geelong era of 07 to last year, really. That period of 4 premierships, really good. Richmond, the 3 premierships in that short period of time. Brisbane, as you mentioned, and Hawthorn, the 4 premierships from 08 and then 13, 14, 15. But I think the interesting thing about Brisbane is they were able to actually rebuild. They've been down the bottom for so many years, but it's been that long journey. So, like, they haven't been great for 20 years. They've been down the bottom for a period of time, and I remember a time where you're looking at it and you're going, oh, shit, Brisbane, like, they weren't challenging. It was around the time that they changed their jumper, actually, funnily enough. So it would have been 2011 era.
Yeah.
Probably just before that, but that era.
And I think it's the way I look at it and see it clearly. I think you just look at the career of Jonathan Brown. He came in, he won 3 premierships, and he's thinking, wow, this is the best club ever. And by the time he retired, they were the laughing stock of the competition, losing games, winning wooden spoons, getting all these draft picks, not really getting off the bottom. And he was thinking, how do I lead this team? Because I'm the old head now. I don't have Vossi and Blackie leading me in. And that's the way it is. And now, he retired a while ago now. But now they've come back up to that, and they're welcoming new players in. Ashcroft won't be there on the weekend, but these sort of players, Jasper Fletcher, they get to come in, and it looks like, after a few finals mishaps, that there might be another surge of Brisbane success in the coming years. One of the other teams that's pretty good, and I saw that our man's pretty desperate to get them in the conversation, is the Sydney Swans. Fish, last year wasn't great for you, but do you have any advice for the fans of either teams this weekend in watching your club in a grand final? You've seen a couple losses, unfortunately.
I have seen a couple. That was my 4th last year, which is a bit disappointing. So obviously 2006, 2014, 2016, 2022. Oh. So it's been a bit of a tough journey. But I just guess, like, don't let the lows get you too much. 'Cause obviously the season comes around so quick. And take positives if you do lose. I mean, Chad Warner's grand final performance, one of the greatest performances in grand final history. So you take positives like that. Like, no one saw that, obviously, performance coming from the Swans on that day. I think you tipped us to win, Boxy, if I remember correctly. And, like, the Swans were coming, but I think anyone loses to Geelong that day, they were absolutely outstanding. I even think if Collingwood did beat the Swans in the prelim, they would have been on the receiving end of a loss. But I think it's just a proud moment. If you get to a grand final, you're one of the best teams in the league, and it's just a great achievement to get there. But I know you guys were talking about 1v2 this year. It's actually the first time since 2014 when it was Sydney Hawthorn, when we kind of had that bit of a rivalry, Boxy, going back and forth. So that was the last time it was 1v2 in a grand final.
And usually you say it's hard to pick, but when I compare, at least this year and last year, say, you could have easily, a lot of people would have tipped Geelong. They had the more experience, and Sydney weren't that 1-2 sort of team. They weren't really on their level. Everyone sort of started picking them because they were young, they were exciting. This one is genuinely 50-50 if you're picking, unbiasedly. If you're trying to pick this one, it's 50-50. And as we try and preview it now, just looking for things, one thing I looked at, and we were discussing it off air before the show, you can relate to this, interstate teams coming down to the MCG. We did have that grand final in Brisbane and in Perth, which you can't really count. It's barely ever happened. We've seen a lot of teams get there, but only 2 have done it in the last 10 or 11 years. And that is the Swans in 2012 and obviously West Coast over Collingwood in 2018, just by the clutch boot of Dom Sheed. And we've seen, I think, 4 or 5 interstate teams come down and lose playing against a Melbourne team. So it's really hard to do. How have you seen that?
I mean, it's just a massive challenge. I mean, obviously, you'll find the Victorian-based sides have more support, I guess, maybe at the ground. I know a lot of corporate tickets are sold, but it's intimidating. It really is intimidating. So Sydney have lost 3 now in the last 10 years, and then you got Adelaide lost one, West
Freo.
Coast lost one, Freo, and
GWS as well, Adelaide.
Tough. And obviously for the Giants' sake, in that 2019 they were severely outnumbered that day, and I think it would get to the players. It would be just the intimidating. It's just like the Roman sort of stuff, like when you're just in there and it's just everyone's against you and no one really wants you to win, and it just I think gets to some players. I think you got to stay calm and just play your brand of footy. I think that's something that Brisbane have done really well on the road this year, where they have struggled. I mean, I know they've won a lot of games at Marvel Stadium. They have struggled at the MCG when they do come to Melbourne. But if they play their brand of football, there is no reason why they can't win on Saturday.
I think that's the important thing for this stat as well. They've come down a bit, but they play at Marvel. And it's not just Brisbane. I think what makes it so hard to come down and win a grand final at the MCG is they don't play half their games down here. They don't play half their games at the MCG. And when we saw GWS get completely dismantled, Adelaide get dismantled by Richmond, it's because Richmond play about 14 games a year at the MCG. Back in those years, for sure, they didn't play at Marvel too much, which made Dimmer quite happy, obviously. But these teams, these Melbourne teams, especially the ones that call the MCG home, they play 13, 14 of their games at the MCG. They know it like the back of their hand.
Interestingly enough, you say that. I think the differential, just off the top of my head, is actually Collingwood played 16 games at the MCG this year compared to Brisbane's 2.
Wow.
So that was something I heard on the radio on the way in, actually. But going back to...
Just quietly, I've got to stick in that one of those games at the MCG for Brisbane was a loss to the Hawks. So just so everyone remembers, Hawthorn beat Collingwood and Brisbane this year. Just had to stick that one in there.
Were they both at the G?
They were both at the MCG.
Oh.
So you're telling me Hawthorn should be in the grand final?
Next year they will be. Yeah.
There
You can book that. Time code that one.
But interestingly enough, though, you actually mentioned the interstate teams. I've only, since the AFL 1990, I can recall 12 times. So there was 4 times in the 1990s, West Coast winning twice, Adelaide back-to-back 97, don't want to talk about 98. 6 times in a row in the 2000s. So you had Brisbane 1, 2 and 3, you had Port Adelaide in 4, you had your Swatties in 5 and West Coast in 6. But then only 2 times since then. So Sydney and West Coast, obviously. So it's kind of like comes in waves, I guess you could say. Will this be the start of the interstate teams actually getting back up there? Who knows?
Well, one point of having an all-interstate grand final, which I can't even remember the last time we had one of those. It might have been 04.
I think it was Sydney West Coast. I reckon it was
06.
Yeah, 2006 was the last one.
So,
Yeah.
And obviously that gives you a 100% strike rate of an interstate team winning it.
Yeah.
But that's just the strength of these Victorian teams, and it would really annoy you if you were from the other states. But Victoria is the footy state. I mean, Brisbane, I mean, the question you ask is just basically a long way of saying who's your winner, in a way. But I think Brisbane have the best chance to do it since in a long time. I think most of the interstate sides that come over, Adelaide was pretty good in 17. They were on the top, but they didn't match Richmond. I think because Brisbane match up so well with Collingwood, I think that's what, for me, gives me the most confidence. But obviously they've got that MCG. Who do they hate us talking about? It's there. I've been to games with the show's good mate Harrison McPhee, big Lions fan. I've seen them bottle games in the like 5-6 goal leads. We saw them lose to Melbourne. They had that one. That was one. That was sealed. They were playing around with the football. All of a sudden, they lose it in the last couple of minutes. It's a mental thing. 80% of footy is above the shoulders. So I can't wait to see it. And it's really the back end of what I think is the biggest statistic in this game. Brisbane 6 in a row against Collingwood. 0 of those games have been at the Melbourne Cricket Ground. They've either been at Marvel Stadium or the Gabba. So how's this one going to go? I'm not sure. They've played them twice this year, beaten them both times. So there's that recency effect coming in. They have beaten them this year, not at this ground.
I think it's interesting you mentioned that, and it begs the question. I mean, you're looking at, obviously, the head-to-head stat, and then you're looking at, well, the path to the grand final. So you've got those two momentum, I guess, figures you've got to look at. So which team do you guys actually think has, without picking a winner, because I think it's different question to ask, but before the bounce is obviously happened, which team do you think is going to the MCG thinking, we've actually got the momentum our way?
Jeez, I think I've never actually said this. I've never thought this going into a game all year. I think the last time might have been maybe Collingwood and Port Adelaide. Maybe I couldn't really pick that one, but I think it's dead even. I honestly do. They couldn't be more even the way they've got there. Home qualifier, home prelim, win. So end of the season, they both won their games at the end of the season. Collingwood a little bit more convincingly than Brisbane, but both won home games in round 24, week off, won the qualifier, week off, won the prelim, grand final. You could say that there's reasons either way, and this is what to me makes this the best grand final in at least 5 or 6 years for me. I've never been more excited because it's just there's so much that points to this being dead heat close. And for Brisbane's side, I guess they did have a bigger win. They probably played better footy. I mean, the Collingwood prelim against the Giants was pretty scrappy stuff. And again, it was sort of the Giants sort of beating themselves a little bit more than Collingwood probably running over the top, whereas Brisbane, aside from the first quarter, absolutely dominated Carlton. I didn't actually watch it. I heard a lot of it on the radio. So maybe you'd go then, but coming all the way down to the MCG, a ground they don't play very well, that saps momentum. It doesn't matter how you look at it. It doesn't matter what Fague says to them. There's that little demon in the back of their head's going to be going, oh, I'm a little bit worried. And as soon as they start thinking they're a little bit worried, a little bit of momentum starts to seek out. And this Collingwood side, I don't know what it is about Fly McRae, but he just gets them going. And so maybe I inch towards Collingwood a little bit. They haven't had to go anywhere. They haven't had to fly anywhere. They've got players coming back in. And a 1-point win against a team like the Giants, who's just built on momentum, I think they own it. I think I've convinced myself that they've got a little bit of an edge.
Well, if you hadn't have convinced yourself, I really want to actually talk about one of the biggest momentum builders. Having been to the last time that they were in a grand final and the last time they won a grand final. So I am talking about 2010, both the drawn grand final and the replay where...
Who did they play?
I think the biggest draw cards to me, and the thing that I think builds momentum into a game, is the Collingwood chant prior to the bounce, before teams have even run out. You see the banner being laid on the ground.
Hopefully it stays up this time.
Hopefully they've got enough tape. Hopefully that's a big in for this week. But
it is supposed to be quite a calm day, so all the best to the Collingwood cheer squad.
We've got a few friends in the Collingwood cheer squad, so we've got to be nice. But that will be the only banner joke we make. But in 2010, I was lucky enough to hold the Saints banner. And the Collingwood chant that started even before they had run out onto the ground, that was just being in the centre of the ground. Now imagine that this Saturday. It's one of those things where if they've got the numbers and they've got that voice, I mean, okay, the prelim final, most of them would have been Collingwood fans this week. Obviously, corporate's a little bit more of an even split. But still, that Collingwood chant, once it starts going on grand final day, it is...
Well, Brisbane haven't had to deal with that. Like, at Marvel, was it really there? Maybe. But the roof's shut. You know, they play that ground brilliantly. They're more confident when they come down to Marvel. They've beaten them before there, the year before. They haven't had to run out onto the MCG, like Fishhead, the Coliseum of all Australia's and Southern Hemisphere's stadiums, and hear it. I think what will help them is they played Carlton in the prelim. And from all reports, I didn't quite see too many pictures because I didn't actually watch it. I listened. But listening to that call on the radio, there was more navy blue than maroon at the Gabba, which is incredible. And they had to deal with an absolute onslaught in the first quarter. You could hear the fans. They were louder than the commentators on the radio when I was driving home on Saturday. So they had to deal with that on their home deck. It doesn't equate. Nothing equates to Collingwood at the MCG, ringing around. But they did overcome a raucous Carlton crowd from 5 goals down, and the pressure they were putting on was insane. I heard a stat on the radio. The pressure gauge was over 240, 250. The AFL average is 180. It's great if you get over 200 at all. So they were under that sort of pressure, and they were able to push through it, and not only push through it and scrape along and win, they dominated after the first quarter. So I think this is the stuff that Fags will be drilling into them. We've been here 4 times before in the prelim. This is our time. You'll hear it. You know you're going to hear it. And that's what a grand final is all about, who soaks up the pressure better.
Yeah, well, I think another thing, I've spoken about the Collingwood's advantage. I think Brisbane's advantage is the weather.
Exactly right.
It's going to be predicted,
It is Melbourne.
It is predicted to be 28, but it is Melbourne, as you said. It could be rainy 1 minute, sun out the next, and then snow for the last quarter, who knows. But 28 degrees, it obviously will favour the Brisbane, who are more acclimatised to that heat.
Well, I don't think we haven't had bad weather in as long as I can remember in the grand final. It's just something about it. Mother Nature just goes, it's grand final day, we're going to absolutely turn it on. I don't think anything's quite beaten 2015 in a while. I remember that being about 38 degrees when the Hawks won the 3rd in a row. That was a pretty good day. But 28, it's going to be sunny. There's not too much wind. And that's exactly what the Lions train in and play in every day. It's not going to quite have the same humidity, but they are a lot more acclimatised to that, which is a good omen. But again, it is at the MCG, which is Collingwood's. So, yeah, it really can go either way. There's quite a lot of history in this one, Woodsy. You can share that one. You're the oldest, so I think you can be the historian today.
I do remember the 02 and 03 grand finals. I think 02 was the one where Buckley won the Norm Smith in the losing one. Anthony Rocker, did he kick a goal or not? That's not discussion today. But Craig McRae obviously played in that with his assistant coach, Justin Lepich. So 20 years on, and they're facing off again. But it's obviously those 2 times were obviously Brisbane Lions. But as Fitzroy, the merger happened. They had faced off 5 times prior to that. So 1903, 1905, 1915, 1917 and 1922. So there's a bit of a grand final history between the two. However, I guess you look at just the coaches, as I mentioned, Craig McRae, he's got a pretty good pedigree in terms of success. He was an assistant at Collingwood in 2011. They unfortunately didn't win, but I think the thing that stands out was he was at Richmond during that 2017-2020 period where they did pick up those flags. So he's got that actual experience of winning a grand final. Tell me about Fags.
Well, just before I get into Fags, I think, and he gets a lot of praise. He was, again, top 3 in Coach of the Year voting, Fly. But what he's done for that club cannot be underdone. Like, it doesn't get enough praise, I don't think, and he gets heaps of it. But we're talking about coming in for a club champion, a club legend, a Hall of Famer, one of the best ever, Nathan Buckley, who, had taken him to a grand final, and if for some absolutely miracle marks and an incredible 4th quarter surge, would have won them that grand final, a favourite son of the club, you had to follow him in. And with the weight of expectation that comes coaching Collingwood, it's incredible. It's like Collingwood's like our Philadelphia. Like there's so much expectation. The fans are livid if you don't, finish at the top, sort of thing. And he's not only made them serious contenders each year, but he's turned them into this incredible squad that never ever says die. Their heart is humongous. They win games from nowhere for fun. They made that prelim. The Swans amazingly got over them. No one could quite believe they'd done that because they'd come from nowhere and done it all year. So he's been incredible, and I think that Richmond experience, like you mentioned, has really been big for him. But on the other side is Chris Fagan. I absolutely love this guy because he was involved in the Hawks, 4 of them, I think he was, as an assistant to Clarko, which a lot of the successful coaches these days are, or were, assistants to Alistair Clarkson. But he's just an awesome guy, and he becomes the oldest coach to ever coach in a decider this weekend, which is remarkable. He's had a fair bit of pain over the last few years, getting absolutely belted in prelims left, right and centre, or, losing out in semis. They had the year that they obviously get a bit of stick for, which was in Brisbane. They couldn't advance. But this year they've recruited, and Fags is stuck to his guns, kept them playing the same sort of football, and it's finally paid off for them. And he joins another pretty historic small group of coaches who never played AFL to coach a grand final, which is remarkable as well. So I'm sure, win or lose, he'll coach them brilliantly again this weekend.
Well, you mentioned that he's only the second VFL AFL coach. John Jack Worrell was the only other one. So obviously there's that small group, but it goes to show that you don't necessarily have to have actually played the game to be a good coach and a good leader at this level.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he is. And he was really crucial at the Hawks as well. He's important. He's a wise guy, and I think he copped a bit of flack because of his finals failures, but I think he's just the perfect man for Brisbane. And he is getting quite old. He's almost your age, Woodsy, so he might not go on if they win, but for too much longer at least. I don't know. I don't have any ties to Brisbane, but I'd really love to see him keep going and see how much success they can get, because he really does deserve it, and he really is one of the best. But he's coming up against the other one who's the best as well for me. So how do you pick this one?
I don't. I really don't know. But before we go into the predictions, I really want to ask, grand finals, what's your greatest grand final memories?
Gee whiz. Leo Barry's mark in 2005, I still remember that. 6 years old. And just to break the drought for the Swans, I think that just is unbelievable. There's so many moments from that game that I do remember. But just to celebrate with my dad at such a young age, thinking that's what it was like. Not knowing that my dad's been a Swan supporter / South Melbourne supporter his whole life. And that was like the first time we've seen us win. And, you know, the older you get, the more you realise how much that probably meant to him. And then obviously to win another one in 2012 with Nicky Mal kicking a couple of unbelievable goals to beat the Hawks. But I'd probably say Leo Barry's mark for sure.
Yeah, I mean, 08 was pretty good. I was 7 years old. I wasn't a massive footy follower back then. And I remember coming out into the lounge room and seeing the old man going ballistic and just thinking, wow, this is pretty cool. And again, brilliant day. And soon after, I learnt of the legend of Big Stewie Doo. But I don't think I can go past 15. Like, where do you even go? Hodgie's goal from the pocket. Like, man. Oh, yeah. When Hodgie kicked that goal, like, this guy's the greatest player ever. Incredible. Like, he had no right to kick that goal from there. That year at school, we had like a footy day in Year 9. And there was a commentary competition. And it was Class V class. And my class nominated me. And I got to actually commentate over that a couple of weeks later as well. So that goal's got a really special place in my heart. But just seeing Cyril dominate, like it was built for that. But yeah, my favourite moment, if I'm going to pick one, is just when that siren went in 15. It was, like I said, 38-degree day. I was at my mate's place, all Hawk supporters, and we just went running out the back with the arms up, 3 in a row. How good's this? And yeah, just to see the club do that, and no one's obviously done it since. Brisbane did it last. The comparisons there are pretty cool, like I mentioned earlier. But yeah, that's when I really realised the weight of grand finals and how awesome it can be and how hard it is to do as well.
I just realised how heartbreaking asking this question is, asking two people who have actually experienced this and then realising, where do I go? I wasn't alive in 66 prior to what contrary to what these guys say. Gosh, there were moments in 2010 when I've gone, we've actually done this. I remember Goddard's mark, him kicking the goal, and just thinking, there's not long left. We've done this.
Well,
obviously,
in that moment, the God in Goddard was really stood true. That's what I was thinking.
Oh, I mean, if I have to answer, like that would probably be it, because that was the closest we've got. I mean, 2009, I haven't brought myself to watch. I know some of the Saints players have only recently got into it, and they've described it as the most pressure game they've ever played in. But I just can't do it knowing, like, the season we had, we were so close. It's one of those things that when it finally happens, and hopefully it does for me, touch wood and everything, like, I can actually go, okay, I've lived through almost. I've lived through the downs. I've lived through the wooden spoons. Like, I'm not a 6-year-old. I was 7 in 97. And I had that same feeling of, oh, we've made a grand final. This is easy. This is what footy is about. My team's going to be there for a long time. And it just wasn't to be. And, like, it's one of those things. Grand final moments. Like, I can go through the final sirens of when Hawthorn got their three-peat, when Richmond finally got up against Adelaide, when it was 90,000 Richmond fans against the Giants, like West Coast beating Collingwood. As a neutral, I can go through, oh, those are great moments, but I have sat through most grand finals going, wow, looking at fans, seeing the ecstasy in their eyes, seeing the joy in their, like, they're hugging their fathers, they're hugging each other, they're hugging random strangers. I'm looking at that and going, when's my turn? Like, I can kind of feel for it for a bit of going, you know what? Oh, that's great. Well done. Oh, awesome. Celebrate. Like Richmond in the streets after the 2017. That was a wild night. Went to the Richmond RSL afterwards. Celebrated with a few Richmond fans, but it just isn't the same. And so I'm there going, that the greatest grand final for me obviously hasn't happened yet. It's going to be when I'm there, when the siren goes, and it's St Kilda's turn.
Yeah.
That's probably something I haven't quite, I guess, thought about a lot, is that in my lifetime being a Swan supporter, I think we've only missed finals 3 times, which is quite remarkable. I think 2009, I think we missed it, 2019 and 2020. That's 3 times in my lifetime. And Woodsy, you're there talking about wooden spoons. I've actually never experienced this winning wooden spoon.
Oh.
Yeah,
I think the closest we got was third last, I think, in 20...
At Darn Academy.
Academy's pretty good, you know. It's Errol Goulden, very good player. But when you say things like that, it actually does make me reflect on how lucky I've been as a Swan supporter. I speak about my dad, you know, seeing how bad we were. Like, he used to go to Lakeside Stadium and see us get smashed. Have his club taken away, like, in a sense, interstate, and he still follows them. Like, it's something I never really quite reflected on, how quite lucky I am as a Swan supporter.
And that's the thing with the granny. Once you win 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, like me, they can't ever take that away from you. So as long as you live, at least you've seen it, which, yeah, you just can never be grateful enough for. And while we're on the topic of grand finals and special moments, I have to give a shout out to my home club, which achieved something quite remarkable a couple of weeks ago. I'm donning the cap. I have been for the last few weeks because Inverloch Cornwall Footy Club, a special shout out here, they won 5 premierships on one day a couple of weeks ago. First grade football, only lost 1 game all year. Second grade football, in a game, in a grand final where they beat a team who'd only lost twice in the last 3 years. And under 18s football, and then first grade netball, who were premiers and champions, undefeated season, and third grade netball. And I don't think there's too many clubs around the state that can say they've ever done that in their history. So congratulations to them.
I was actually listening to the radio, and it was an amazing commentator. I even texted you and said, are you supporting Inverloch here, or are you supporting Phillip Island? It was that much of an unbiased call. And Phillip Island kicked this amazing goal, and you would have thought that Boxy was all in on Phillip Island.
It was a ripping game. There was a bit of wind around, and yeah, I guess I shouldn't have lied before. That's my favourite grand final moment. It's not the AFL, but getting to call the club you've grown up at to a grand final victory, I can't put into words. It was a dream. I was getting paid to do that as well. So it's remarkable, and that's how good country footy is. It brings the whole community together. Yes, the AFL does the same thing with strangers hugging in the stands, but at community level, it's their whole life, and they are the club. It's not these guys you idolise. It's not these AFL professionals. It's just John and Jim who run the bakery, and in that town, and they're winning it with people they've recruited from a few other towns and stuff like that, and they're all coming together, and it's their escape. So yeah, I've never quite been a part of something as incredible and mesmerising as that. Like, it's seriously one for the ages. So, just a special season. And everyone involved, there's a long list. I won't go into it. But they just did a remarkable job. And the netball club and the football club came together so well on and off the field and court. And, I'm yet to see any other club do it quite as well as that and achieve quite, as incredible things as they did. And I've got to give another shout out to another local boy from Gippsland, Matt Stevic. You would have known him if you follow AFL football. An incredible 10th straight grand final this weekend. 10 straight. That's the record. He's born in Leongatha, same place as I was. So well done, Matt. I think he went to high school with my beautiful mother as well. And he's an awesome umpire. He's been one of the best for, obviously 10 straight years now. And all the best to Matt. And it's his 11th grand final total. So just a remarkable achievement, making sure we include the boys in green as well as the boys in maroon and black and white.
Well, I guess we've had our AFL Grand Final talk. But, only one thing to ask, and who have you got? Norm Smith, margin? Who have you got?
Oh, you're putting me under the gas already, are you? All right. I'm going to go with Brisbane Lions to break through after a few years of hurt. And I'm going to pick him by 21 points in the end. And my Norm Smith medalist is Kadeen Coleman. Fish?
I'm also going to tip the Brizzy Lions because I remember 2012 quite well for obvious reasons. And in the build-up to the game, it was all about the Swans MCG hoodoo. We were so bad at the MCG, never won at the MCG, but on the biggest day of the year is when it matters the most. And I believe that Brisbane Lions will win by 11 points. And to go with the Brownlow medal and a premiership medal, Lachie Neale will be Norm Smith medalist.
Well, you talk about that. I'm there going debating my choice now. You both have gone Brisbane. I'm going Collingwood by 15. I think they've been the best team all year. But they've had in the last month or so, other teams have risen. But I think Collingwood will prove that they're still just a little bit better than, the Brisbanes, the Giants, only beating them by 1 point. But I've got Collingwood by 15 and Boxy's favourite Nick Dacos to get Norm.
Fair enough. We'll see what happens, and we could go on for hours talking about this grand final and every single play and how it's going to play out and who and why is going to win, because it really is an absolute blockbuster in every sense of the word. I can't wait. I just want Saturday to come round already. Friday's going to be pretty good. Thanks for giving us the day off, Victoria. Pretty cool. And hopefully it is great weather. And, hopefully it's just an absolute classic of a grand final and not like last year when Fisher's Swans didn't really serve up any contest.
Wasn't needed.
Sorry to bring that one up. But in the other side of the AFL, the AFLW, which is absolutely humming again this season, Woodsy, it's the big four at the top once again.
Yeah, well, 4 rounds in, and I've been hounding on the ones to watch of Melbourne, Adelaide, Brisbane and North. Now, Melbourne and Adelaide are undefeated on top, but Brisbane North lost a game. They're joined by 4 others, Geelong, Gold Coast, Essendon and Richmond. Obviously, each team doesn't play each other once, 10-round season, but it's interesting to see these teams stand up. Obviously, 6 games to go, a lot can happen, and other teams may get in there, but right now, as I said, Melbourne, Adelaide, undefeated. They're the ones to watch. Adelaide scored the highest score this season, over 100. I think it was 106, if I have to go off the top of my head. I don't have the stats here, but looking at the stats, we've got the leading goal kickers, Jamie Stanton from Gold Coast with 12, and the highest average disposals is Jasmine Garner from North Melbourne. So
just with a lazy 31.
31.8, so edging on 32, but with the reduced quarter length, to get 32 disposals is no mean feat. And
that's some sort of poisoning, that from Garner.
I think it's the AFLW MVP. I'm not sure. They may have already named it something, but it's not the Brownlow. I'm pretty sure it's
Their version.
best and fairest or something. But their version, I would say Jasmine Gardner, after 4 rounds, will be up there. I'll go so far as to say she'll be my pick to be leading after 4 rounds, and we'll see how we go at the end of it. But I mean, it is exciting. St Kilda picked up their first win against Collingwood, and they play against the Bulldogs on Friday. A few Friday games, and I think Collingwood play Essendon at Punt Road on Saturday. So if it's not already sold out, I'd be imagining there might be a few Collingwood fans who just might be going that walk from Richmond Station and go, oh, might just have a curtain raiser at Punt Road.
And there's plenty of footy. You mentioned on Friday, I think you said there's 5 games on that public holiday, so make sure you get around to those. AFLW, the best it's ever been, just incredible. And then on Saturday morning as well, and also on Saturday before the grand final, the men's grand final, it's a futures game, which is always a ripper as well. So that's the curtain raiser there. I just wanted to say as well, some footy we had last weekend. You mentioned Jamie Stanton from the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast Suns won the VFL Grand Final. And they had a young 16-year-old kick a goal on that day too. So they didn't quite make the finals this year in the big leagues, but they did sign a pretty big fish in Damien Hardwick. They've got a lot of young talent. Their academy is amazing. So the Gold Coast Suns are definitely going places in the future.
And I think that Will Powell is the best of the lot, isn't he? Our favourite player, Boxy for the Gold Coast Suns. But Dimmer was actually there on Sunday. They panned him a lot in the stands. I had the privilege of watching that game, and unfortunately I wasn't able to go because I wish I was there to support the Suns. Because being an interstate supporter, I guess you kind of want the interstate teams to succeed. I guess in that kind of side of the bracket like Brisbane and Gold Coast, always kind of back those guys in. But they've just got an unbelievable, I guess, core group that have played VFL most of the season. I know James Cheetahs unfortunately missed the VFL Grand Final. I think he's played 2 or 3 seasons maybe with Gold Coast in the knee for VFL. Like, he's been a core member.
Captain too, I think.
He was their captain.
Yeah.
He missed out with suspension when he hit Cozzy high and late.
It was a really nice touch. They had his jersey
Yeah.
on the door as they walked out as well. So just a bit of added motivation. Maybe one of the clubs can do that this week. Maybe if it's Daniel Rich who doesn't get a game, maybe the Lions do that. Obviously retiring this season, that might be something that they need. But yeah, going back to the AFLW Suns, do you think they're on the back of Stanton's season? Do you think they can make a real run at it?
Oh, I mean, anybody can. I've got to say no. I'm going to be blunt and say no, and I hope I'm proven wrong. I hope Gold Coast now go out and win it because it's not one of the big 4 that I've named. And I would really love to see a team come out of those outside of Melbourne, Adelaide, Brisbane and North, because they're the ones that are just so far into it that it's like above the rest by probably a tier or 2, where it's like, okay, who's there? Like, interesting to know, like, talking about the sides that are out of it, or not in that top 4 bracket, your Sydney Swans. They got Chloe Malloy, and they've won their first 2 ever games.
Yeah, so they went last season without a win completely, which was obviously not the way they wanted to go. I think was it Hawthorn, Essendon, Swans and Power that all came in together, and the Swans were the only side not to get a win. And they recruited extremely well in the off-season. Obviously, Chloe Malloy being the main one, just got her 50th AFL game this season against the Brizzy Lions, and they got an outstanding ruckman in Ali Morfitt, who has won the Rising Star nominee for round 1 and continues to have the questions about is she the best ruckman in the league. And watched the Swans game on the weekend when they won, and I have to say she'd have to be up there for sure. She absolutely dominates, and I'm excited to see how she develops now the Swans, I guess, finish the season.
Yeah,
It's that damn academy again.
that damn academy now.
Former Giants player, mind you.
I will add to this. It's great to see the women's version of the AFLW being taken local. Like, you don't get to see that. You've seen it in Windy Hill, seeing it at Moorabbin. You go up to Sydney. There's North Sydney Oval.
North Sydney. They played at Hanson Park on the weekend as well. And
Yep.
I was actually talking about this at work the other day. It's good for the communities around the grounds. I know they can't play at Punt Road, I think, until this weekend because of the redevelopments and a few games being played at Icon Park. But how good is it seeing football at Windy Hill again?
Oh, it's amazing. Now, you mentioned Punt Road. I will mention that it was actually first slated to be played at the AIA Centre, which is Collingwood's training base. But because they wanted to turn that into a live site, they've requested and the AFL approved it to actually get moved. So it's amazing to see, and it's, I think, an amazing opportunity once again for people just starting to stroll to the MCG. I know the traditions of Grand Final Day, you like to either get there earlier, soak it all in, you get the pre-game entertainment out of the way, but, I mean, if there's a game featuring your club and your team's already in the Grand Final, you might as well chuck the support to the women.
I think it'll be a massive crowd there on Saturday. I really think it'll be like potentially a record-breaking crowd for an AFLW game. I'm not sure what they got at Hawthorn Bombers at Marvel Stadium, but I think it's going to be full Punt Road. It's going to be chockers.
Is the capacity greater than Icon Park?
I'm not sure. I just think it's just going to be a festival of footy. You talk about AIA, that's not too far from the MCG, which obviously is just a stone throw from Punt Road. And all of it is going to be black and white with a few tinges of maroon and gold. And it's just going to be incredible. And if it's good weather, Melbourne is going to be absolutely buzzing, which is exactly what you want. It's probably one of the most anticipated grand finals in recent years. It feels like the week's going really fast, but I'm sure it doesn't for the players. And in the AFLW as well, how good is that planning to have these games on the Friday and then that game on the Saturday to really put it in the spotlight? If it isn't already, it deserves to be. And those local games as well. The biggest thing for me is if you're a young girl, you've got the whole way in now. If you want to be, even if you don't want to play AFL, even if you just want to play some footy, it's there. You can see it. You can do it because you can see it. And there's nothing better than that. It's exactly what we wanted when it came in. It's exactly what they were looking for. And the crowd's never been bigger than this year for the men's game. And that'll carry over, like you've been saying, on Saturday.
Yeah, well, I think I'm just getting that festival of footy. And you saw it in the Women's World Cup and the hype it drew. Like, it's this swirl of what ifs. Like, you can actually be a AFLW player when 20 years ago there was no pathway. So it's amazing to see. And bringing back to the festival of footy, something I should have mentioned previously with the grand final, I would not be going near Punch Street or Swan Street Saturday afternoon at all. Might be a bit black and white. So especially with Punt Road being taken over, I can see it definitely being a little bit black and white with a little bit of red in there, which I like. So it'll be good to see some red, white and black on grand final day.
Even if it is in the really weird sort of out and around the back sort of way that the Saints aren't quite there. But as you mentioned before, Woodsy, one day, and it just makes you so giddy. And you just sit here just thinking, you're just so excited. And it doesn't even finish there. I mean, it finishes there for the AFL, but not the AFLW. That'll continue on for its next 6 weeks, as you mentioned. And there's even more sports going on, just in case you thought we were only going to talk about footy today, which we could. But more importantly, well, probably maybe not more importantly, but just as importantly, there's another game. This one includes a little white ball or a little red ball, depending on what sort of format you're playing. And we've got our man who knows a lot about it. He's made quite a few runs himself, won a premiership last year, just a lazy premiership for the Mulgrave Cricket Club. We're into the cricket world, Fish. What's been happening?
A fair bit, actually, Boxy, and a lot of it not extremely good for Australia on the international level, unfortunately. Still got those World Cup warm-up matches happening now against India. Played 2 over the last week. We got 1 tonight at 6 p.m. when we're recording this. So hopefully Australia can bounce back and hopefully find some form. But, geez, the first one lost by 5 wickets, and the only real standout for us in that game was, I guess, Warner with 52, Steve Smith with 41 in his return, and then got a golden duck in the second one, unfortunately for Smudger. But Josh Inglis with 45, middle order batsman, someone we actually quite need to stand up. But the man for India has been Shubman Gill. To be honest, 74 in the first game and 104 in the second one. And Shreyas Iyer, can't say I've seen much on the international stage myself, but 105 of 90 rocks. And that's quite outstanding as they won the second one as well.
Yeah, I think Iyer, I mean, where do you go with India? They've got stars from 1 to 11 to even 12. But I think Shreyas, since I've been seeing him, he's as dangerous top order bat as I've seen in short form cricket at the moment. He hits the ball. We saw Hardik Pandya come in a few years ago, and he's aggressive and exciting with the ball, and then he can absolutely nuke him with the bat. But this eye is just the skill and the hand eye, how powerful he hits the ball. Good luck getting through him. But first, to even get to him, you have to get through Shubman Gill, who we saw come on a few years ago in the Test Arena. Didn't really, we weren't too fussed with him. But yeah, boy, he is just tearing us apart at the moment. I watched a bit of that last game a few nights ago, and it just, we had Hoff bowling, Greeny was bowling, world-class bowlers, some of our best red ball bowlers at least, but they didn't even look like getting them out. And then rain delayed play, which probably saved us a little bit from the humiliation. But these guys were just going, we're at home. You're not getting me out. I'm way better than you are. And you mentioned it. We're in a little bit of a hole at the moment. And our first game is next Sunday. I think it's the 8th, might be the 7th of October. Do you reckon we can turn it around in a week?
At the moment, I can't really see us doing it. I know players like Len Maxwell have just flown over, and our bowling is still very strong. I mean, Mitchell Starc, Josh Hazlewood, Pat Cummins are all over there. Cameron Green hasn't been bowling very well. We all know that. He's kind of slowed down with his development with his bowling. I think maybe focusing on batting a little bit more. But this is as low as I've been going into a World Cup for quite some time. I mean, 2015 seems like a long, long time ago when we lifted that trophy. But on the other end of it, I look at England, who they just keep turning over these white ball players. I mean, Will Jacks again in the game against Ireland 94, Sam Hain, a Warwickshire boy from Birmingham 89, in the washout game of the second game, which was washed out, Ben Duckett 107. Oh. These guys just absolutely taking the piss for England in the one-day format, and it's quite remarkable.
And just quietly, if they're not enough, you've got a B Stokes down the order. If you need him,
he's just there chilling. Just there chilling.
Just for mine, the best one-day player of this generation. Just a little bit down the order there, if you don't mind.
Now you mentioned the first game is Sunday week. Now, obviously, the World Cup squad is to be finalised now. There's a few injuries.
Yeah. So it has to be finalised by Thursday. What would the date of that be? So let me check. Thursday, the 28th of September. Has to be finalised, locked in. Now, there's injuries up the wazoo for Australia at the moment. And as Fish said, I don't think we've been this down bad going into a world competition in a very, very long time. You mentioned Steve Smith coming back. He had a wrist injury. Maxwell obviously had leg and foot complications from his broken leg/foot last summer. Cummins under his own injury cloud, which is always very dangerous because of how hard he goes in and comes into bowl. Starc hasn't even come back yet. He's hoping to come back for the first game, maybe the second. Travis Head, he's obviously out, and at best, with a broken hand, comes back for the back half of the tournament. So do they even pick him in the squad? Do they leave him out? And then, on the other hand, you've got guys like Zampa, who's been absolutely belted in recent games, going for 113 no wicket in the last game in South Africa. And Ashton Agar, who's played 4 matches all year.
Well, I've got to ask, with you saying that, is how are we going to actually pick an 11 and get them settled in time? Or I don't think we can now because they're so close to that first game.
Well, that's the exact thing. So we've got these practice matches again. Yeah, one on the Wednesday night. We're recording this on the Wednesday afternoon. And again, I think they're really just treating them as real practice matches. As in, we don't actually care what the result is. We just want to find some sort of,
they want to find a gem. Let's be honest. They've picked players like David. I think opened the batting in the last game. Didn't quite work out. Tim David, and they're just trying to find that gem, that play that can save them.
It's too late for that. You need to be doing this over the summer, and you need to be going. We need to find. There's 11 players that can play on the ground. You need to be finding that 20 players. Rotate them. I don't like seeing, and I've seen it so much, is you see the same 11 for year upon year, and you might get one person come in, but it's like, oh, no. They have one bad game, and so they're replaced with the usual.
It's interesting you say that, because we played, obviously, a 5-match series in South Africa, and we've played 2 games currently in India, warm-up games. So in those 7 games total, there hasn't been 1 11 from game to game, or one from 1 to 7 that's been the same. We're talking Matt Short opens one game, goes down to 8 next game. He's in one game, he's out the next game. There's no sort of flow.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm like. That's not the time to be doing this. The time to be doing this would have been the summer in Australia. we play a one-day series, do we not? Like, have that be the time where you have this changing up squads. Like, I don't want to, like, obviously, if it's a test series, the Ashes, you want to see the best 11 out on the field each
I think
time.
that's exactly what's cost us, and it's nothing to do, it's fully out of our control, but we've probably been hurt by our own success. So we had the...
Focusing too much on the Ashes?
Not even focusing, just playing, just being there.
Yep.
So we just spent, 2.5, 3 months in England? Because we had the World Test Championship.
True, yes.
We basically played in India in February, and then from then on it was tests. Like we were World Test Championship against India, the preparation for that, tour games, all the rest, and then 5-game Ashes series, which obviously for the Australian cricket team is the biggest thing on the calendar. We've won 5 World Cups. They couldn't care less. That Ashes was the biggest thing that's happened to this team in years. So that's probably cost us, because by the time that was all over, the players were gassed. I mean, that was a massive series. They were belting
don't
us.
get much time off. They don't get much time off at all. I remember the former Australian team doctor played for my club Mulgrave, and there'd be times that he might come back for one game between the Australian summer and then just shoots off overseas, goes here, goes everywhere. Like, these guys are working their ass off 12 months of the year. And footy players, like AFL players here, are complaining about the 16 weeks they get off in the off season. We'll try to be a cricket player because you don't get a lot of time off. And some players that I'll go into shortly in the county, they've gone from Australian summer to the England summer back to the Australian summer now, and they're playing cricket 12 months of the year.
Well, I've always thought over the last couple of years where international powerhouses like the West Indies have dropped off so much, because basically all of their players are just going, no, I'm going to take more money to just play T20s around the world. And they've got so much money because they've got so good at 2020 because that's all they play. And I used to wonder, why are they doing that? That's stupid. Have pride in your national colours. But I understand now, because maybe it is. It didn't look like it in recent years when we were on top of everything and England was on top of everything, making it look easy. But it actually is really hard to just change form in 2 weeks and dominate still. Because they're so different, especially these days. They are so different. England maybe not. They play everything the same and they're just good, which is cannot be more annoying for an Australian right now. But anyway, that's off topic. It is quite hard, like I've said, to come off 3 or 4 months over in Europe playing playing cricket over there with the red ball, and taking your time, really digging it into your mental state that I'm playing this sort of game, and then all of a sudden 3 weeks, month later, you're over in South Africa, you're facing all these class bowlers in the white ball game, trying to make a big score and then take quick wickets when they're trying to hit you every ball. So it is a quick change, but I guess they're paid to do that. So I don't really know who I'm arguing for here, but we're in a rut nonetheless.
Well, as I said, like, my point is, like, this isn't the time to be trying to figure out what your squad is. Like, yes, we're almost in October, so I'm talking about we should have had our World Cup squad almost penciled in on who we want in March. Well, that's my approach. Yes, we've got the England test stuff going on, and then we can work it out. But I mean, surely you're not going, we actually don't know who our final 11 are going to be. So we're going to just, in our last 5 warm-up games where you said we're playing India in our first game, where you don't want to be going in there still trying to scratch your head. Oh, yeah, we're unsure on their final 11, but we'll put them into place having not played in that format.
Yeah, so just looking at things to give you a bit of an idea of how we look and what's going to happen in this World Cup that, like I said, starts next week. I think the first game is next Thursday night. Our first game will be Sunday the 8th of October, 7:30 Melbourne time. And it is the hosts, India. So it does not get any more challenging than that. I guess the good thing is we've been playing them. We know how they'll look. But how we'll look, who knows? Because I guess it's lucky, boys, that we're playing in India, because we might not need the full pace attack. Because usually you're probably going to pick your 2 spinners. In saying that, who do we pick? Agar hasn't played. Yeah, he can bat a little bit better. Maxwell, sore leg. Is he going to be able to play? Zampa, not in great form. And then if you've even got question marks up and down the order, does Inglis play? Does Carey just play? Does Inglis play as a batsman? David Warner's in form. I guess you pick him for his last World Cup. who bats with him, who opens with him. Is it Short? Is it Green? Is Green going to play? He's been battling concussion. So there could not be any more question marks. And our start to the World Cup is India, South Africa, Sri Lanka and Pakistan. And obviously 3 of those lads have world-class spinners and batsmen that can tear the game apart. So we could not be in a more challenging position. It would be very Australian of us to pump up and just use our spirit to get a few wins there. But it's going to be so challenging, and we've got no depth in our pace bowling at all. Nathan Ellis and Spencer Johnson have both gone home with injuries. So basically, it's going to be the main 3, our beloved main 3 of Stark, Hazelwood and Cummins. But like we've been saying, they've just been playing red ball cricket and really, really tough and challenging red ball cricket for 2.5 months. So they're going to be absolutely knackered. No wonder Stark's broken down, because these are big guys who are humming in, putting heaps of pressure on their body. And shout out to Josh Hazelwood. He made a 23 against India in one of the matches there. So they're going to be up for it because they have to be. And it's a World Cup. It's the biggest competition in cricket. But we're well underdone. And for me, India are just extreme favourites. The way that they're just knocking us around. It's their home deck. They've got world-class spinners, pace bowlers. Their batsmen are almost unstoppable. So I think it's them. Obviously, as Fish said, England, how do you really go past them? The only question mark is the conditions for them. They're tearing apart Ireland at the moment. And then I think Pakistan for me, like I said last episode, I haven't seen their squad yet. But I think for us, it's going to be really hard. But obviously the expectation's going to be there. But we've won 5 of them. So, I mean, we mentioned 2015, one of the best cricket tournaments I've ever seen in my life. Remarkable. My man, Mitchy J, just tearing it apart. So, I guess, I'm like, as a Hawthorn supporter, supporting a team that's won 5 World Cups, I'm not putting too much pressure on us. I still love us to win. I still expect us to win games. But I guess because of the history we've had, and if we win 6, that's just unfathomable. But I'm actually really excited to still watch it and see how far India go, see how far Pakistan go, and my Dutchman who qualified for the World Cup over the West Indies, which is remarkable as well.
Now, I've got to ask, you're mentioning the squad. I'm going to go back to that because you mentioned that we've only got 3 pacemen. Now, I'll put the question to Noah and yourself if you can answer it, but can we actually pick anybody outside of the initial squad we picked? And if so, who is there? I know the domestic one-day cup has been going on at the moment. Has there been anybody that stands out that we can actually call upon?
Well, one I should have mentioned. We obviously got Cam Green, but like Fish said, is he focusing on his bowling? And Sean Abbott. But I haven't really been looking domestic. What about you?
Yeah, so obviously the Marsh Cup started this week. And the only bowler that I think has really stood out is Lance Morris. Someone that was meant to play for my North Ants, but hurt his back, has come back quite immensely for WA in their 4-wicket win. Otherwise, Josh Philippe, 90 with the stick for WA. Bo Webster, 83 for Tassie. But the one person I'm actually quite surprised that we didn't get selected is Peter Hanscom. I think the last one-day series we played in India, he absolutely dominated with a couple of tons, 50s. He's such a good player in India.
And we always pick him when we go there. Every single time we play any form of cricket in India, Pistol always gets picked. So, a bit weird, isn't it?
Yeah, he's someone that I love watching bat. I mean, I know he has a weird technique, but in India it works. And for one-day cricket, it really helps him. I mean, he scored 51 for Victoria in their win just the other day. So, I'm not sure if he can be picked, but I really think he should. And he's coming off great form for Leicestershire as well.
Yeah, I think he captains the Vics, right? Yeah, so I think since they made him captain, which was maybe a season or 2 ago, he's just come along beautifully. And when he goes back and plays for the Saints in the Prem, he dominates that as well. And like you said, weird technique. When he has got his goes in the Test colours, it hasn't been amazing, hasn't taken the world by storm, but he plays spin so well. So, bit of a head scratcher. Maybe the form of Marnus got him considered over the top. But to answer your question, Woodsy, I don't think once you finalise your squad, you can add too many more. Maybe if there's injuries, which I expect there to be a few injuries.
You mentioned that it has to be finalised by tomorrow, so we can still bring people in. We can fly people over as it stands on the Wednesday. Obviously, if you're listening to or watching this post that, you will know what the situation is. But, is it possible that Hanscom can actually get called up I mean, we've got Maxwell, Stark, Smith and Cummins, as you mentioned, under the injury clouds. Like, is there somebody that we can actually bring in there?
I think that'd be really stupid not to, especially when the test players, which makes up 3/4 of the team, especially when they've had such a big European summer with such big workloads, they'd be really silly to not give them heaps of cover. And especially with injuries to Alice and Johnson and them going home, I think they have to. I think maybe Lance does get a little bit of a call up, even if he's just in the nets, because that's the other thing.
He's rapid too.
Exactly, and he can bat a little bit as well. It's going to hurt WA, who I think are really good fancies in all the one day and the Shield stuff, just quietly. But yeah, I just think they have to. And like I was going to say before, the thing about cricket that not all fans realise is you need continuous bowlers in the nets. You don't want to just face Stark, because if Stark gets tired, he bowls less in the nets. Maybe he doesn't have a session in the nets, then he's just facing Cummins and Zampa. The more bowlers, the better, I reckon, because then they don't have to work as hard, especially if they're playing. So I think the bigger the squad, the better, and the more diverse in terms of skill sets, the better. But yeah, it's really, really intriguing, and it's definitely one to watch before our first game.
You'll find in especially big tournaments overseas, and even if they're here, they will go to local Premier Indian cricket, and they'll find bowlers that bowl like Ashwin, bowl like their players, and they'll bowl to them in the nets. So net bowlers are also very common, especially over there in big tournaments, because just the workloads the bowlers will be under, like you mentioned, Boxy, is quite immense, and backing it up every day in the nets is going to be quite tough.
It's going to be hot. I'd imagine it'd be really hot. And we talked about the crowd last week on that episode, so it does not get any harder. But that's the Australian way. It seems like when it gets hard, we just get to work, and I would not be surprised, like I said before, if we pulled out some miraculous wins and then somehow choke the semi-final. That's probably what we usually do, and collapse a few times. So expect that along the way. It'll be a bumpy ride, but hopefully it's a good one. Cannot wait to see who's in that first 11. Cannot for the life of me pick it from here.
Definitely not.
But I think, yeah, like I said, there might be a few injuries, might be a few players that will excite, but it is against India, so we are up against it. We'll see what plays out before then, see how they go and how they prepare before Sunday the 8th. But as far as the World Cup goes, at this point, we'll probably talk about it again next week. I've still got India taking it out.
Yeah, I'm still backing England. I really am, and just their core players. I mean, there's people that are playing red ball cricket. One person I'll mention when I go into the county stuff, they're just whacking it. They just play such an aggressive brand of cricket, and they do it so successfully. And, I mean, they're players like Ben Stokes that occasionally just walk back in and whack 182 the other week, and, you know, Sam Hain comes in and he whacks it, and Will Jacks is whacking it. Ben Duckett, a test player that's whacking it as well, and I just cannot go past England, even in those conditions. They went to Pakistan and did so well with this Baz ball, and that's the reason why I see them getting over the lines. They can do it anywhere.
Well, I think it's funny. We played England in the summer in one day, and if I do recall, we might have embarrassed them, or at least we beat them at the G quite convincingly, if I do recall. We were there. It was an ugly game by their standards that they're showing now. I wouldn't have picked them back then. I wouldn't have picked them probably after the first two Ashes games. But their red ball game has translated into this white ball game of they may be the moral victors of the Ashes, but I still think they're going to be the team to beat in the World Cup.
And I'll move on to some red ball cricket, some county cricket, which I still find so fascinating. And this is one of the finish for the ages, I guess you could say. Surrey are on top, and they're currently leading the county championship. They're playing third place Hampshire as we speak. And Surrey at the moment batting, they're 2 down for 47 or something in the first dig. Essex are in second, and they're playing my boys Northamptonshire, who sit last. There's still a massive story that Essex could somehow win this. And the way they have to do it is Hampshire have to do a massive favour, and they have to beat Surrey. But then Essex have to get maximum batting points. If you guys don't know what batting points are, you get an extra point for every 50 over 250 runs. So 300, 350, 400, 450, and it caps at 450. So there are some additional batting points. So Essex are going to have to bat twice and make a lot of runs and bowl a poor Northampton side out twice. So yesterday, Essex won the toss and bowled on a greenish wicket at Northampton. And they started quite strong. They took 4 early wickets. And they brought this guy out, Rob Keogh, someone you guys might not have heard of, someone I've had to deal with a little bit when I was over in England in June and July. And he's someone that loves his cricket. He's a Northampton boy through their academy, through and through Northants. And for his standards, he's had a really poor season. But he's a great cricketer, great person. He's currently sitting on 154 not out off 140 balls, striking over 100. He has 762 runs, an average of 40 this season. I know we spoke on how Sam Whiteman had done so well, but Robbie Keogh has just thrashed his runs out the park. And it's their first 100 at home this season. But it's just sad that relegation is almost certain. But even for a team that's right down the bottom, Bazball's going right through it, right through county cricket. And there are some stats like Josh Bonanen from Lancashire, 1,189 runs at 56. And this guy isn't even getting a look in for England. These are the players that have in their depth. Like their depth, they're playing county cricket. He's absolutely dominating for Lancashire, and they're coming 5th. So there's some big stocks. And there are also some players that they might be leaving, and I guess sadly for some, rumours are circulating that this could be Alistair Cook's last match. So no better way to go out than, I guess, a county championship Div 1 win.
Yeah, he's had enough of scoring runs for once, Alistair Cook. Total, he'd have a number that's not even fathomable, wouldn't he?
Geez, well, what do you get, over 14,000 test runs? And he's been playing for Essex for such a long time. He's an absolute legend. I had the pleasure of meeting him last September, and he gave me a match shirt, so that's something I'll get in a frame one day. Haven't quite got round to it yet, but lovely guy. I mean, he just goes about his cricket, just keeps going. I mean, people are saying, oh, does it prove how weak England cricket is that he's still going about it and hasn't stepped away? Well, no, he still wants to play cricket, but he's given his spot up for someone to play international cricket. That's a big difference there. I mean, Peter Siddle still plays for Victoria. Oh, is he taking a bowler spot? No. He's still helping these players develop and get better at the game. And imagine you're a young Essex Academy player. Let's say you're an opening batsman. You could be opening the batting with Sir Alistair Cook. And that is just something that I find quite remarkable, that he's still going around and actually doesn't move from first slip, mind you. That's his spot all day, every day. Doesn't move from first slip, and can you blame him?
Oh, you mentioned he's a sir, so I think he can do whatever he wants. If you're a sir and you've made that many runs, I think you deserve it. And you mentioned the depth that they have. It's pretty lucky that we just played the Ashes and retained them, because they're in some sort of place, the Poms, in their cricketing world. But back on our shores, how's our domestic outlook at the moment?
Yeah, so obviously the Marsh One Day Cup has just kicked off, and the only two results that I saw before this, there was a match going on at the moment between Tasmania and New South Wales, but WA defeated Queensland by 4 wickets. Sam Whiteman, back in Australia's shores, makes 62.
Funny that.
What a player, 62. Lance Morris, obviously, with 4 wickets, as I mentioned before. And our boys, Victoria, did defeat Tasmania by 3 wickets. Scobo, 2 wickets, went at 3 and over, just a casually 30 runs off 10 overs. He's someone that isn't quite mentioned for one-day cricket because he just bowls that nagging line and length. And do I think he would be good in Australia one-day colours? Probably not. I think we've seen it with Bazboy, kind of gets whacked a little bit, but for this kind of stand, he's unbelievable. For batting-wise, Victoria, Tom Rogers with 45. I mentioned Peter Hanscom with 51, but Campbell Callaway with 46. Now, he's someone that got great opportunities for Australia A, and unfortunately never quite got going in that regard. And he's such a highly regarded cricketer, great talent, and someone that will definitely be wearing a baggy green one day. Another guy, a local guy for us, plays for Richmond, plays at Central Reserve, Mitch Perry. Mitch Perry is an unbelievable quick bowler, and he will be playing for Australia one day, and I can't quite wait to see that day.
Yeah, Mitch Perry's been unbelievable for the Tigers in the last few years, and so is Tom Rogers. I think he plays out at Ringwood.
Plays at Ringwood, yeah.
They know a lot of talk about David Warner, and hats off to him. He's had a remarkable career. Whenever he wants to go, he's welcome to go. And talking about replacements, don't look further than Tom Rogers. There's something in that left-hander from Ringwood. He's been incredible. And you mentioned before, he just whacks them. Yes, maybe he's playing at Junction Oval, which is known as a bit of a road, not the biggest ground, but he's a serious talent. So,
But you got to think, Boxy, last year he was a no one. He was a COVID replacement for the Melbourne Stars, and he whacked 50 on debut. He was just a premier player from Ringwood, and now he's got a state contract. He's back at the Melbourne Stars again, and that just proves how you got to take your chances. And we talk about Campbell Callaway with Australia A. This guy couldn't quite believe the rise he's had, and people are now talking about it for Australia, like you mentioned, for David Warner's replacement, and I don't think he could imagine that a couple of years ago.
yeah, and you can see it's about taking that opportunity at any level you are. Like we've seen Big Bash players come in, dominate, and then all of a sudden they're into the test squad. And it's not even the same cricket, but there's something to be said about taking your opportunity, like you said, and showing that you can bat, just showing your technique, even if it is a different form. So hopefully he has a great Big Bash season, because I really think there's something there in him. Is there any more cricket around the world?
Look, there's not much more cricket going on at the moment. I guess the one thing is just how big the World Cup is, and I guess my key points is, I guess I want to throw to you guys, is our bowling good enough anymore? I mean, you got to think the bowlers we had, Stark, Hazelwood and Cummins. Cummins is still up there with the best in the world, but I just don't quite think they're there anymore, sadly.
I think the big thing that's hurt us in the one-day World Cup, even though he hasn't played much of it in his career, is the injury of Nathan Lyon. Especially because the next best is Agar. And I love Ash. Ash is an incredible white ball player, been awesome for the Scorchers. But like I mentioned before, he's played 4 games this year. And Zamps, it's such a big role for Zamps, especially in India, where he actually, despite being our best white ball spinner for years, hasn't had actually an amazing record compared to, definitely compared to Australia. So I really do think Nath would have got a real go. And the sort of competitor Nath is, he would have really played well for us. And yeah, I think it's going to get to a point maybe in the summer where you see a lot of young pacers come through, because our big three they're just worn out, and they are getting a bit older. We're not in that honeymoon period anymore where they're just up and about and they've got that young natural energy. They're getting a bit older. So I think, and we won't complain, I think you'll see a good dose of ScoBo this summer.
I think we've got to really actually, I'm just going to say it wildly, is we've got to actually separate the two, white ball and red ball now. Actually have a devoted white ball squad that looks after mainly one day and T20s. Yes, you can have a few players that cross over to the red ball, but in terms of the pace bowlers, so separate them.
Do you reckon we could do the same sort of model like England did when they won it? Obviously, they had a different captain.
Well,
he didn't play Test cricket for them. Had Owen Morgan, brought him in, and it's a completely different thing. And that was really successful. I'd hate us to do that because the Poms did it first and we'd be copying.
No,
but would it work?
We wouldn't be copying. We did it. Think of Adam Gilchrist when he was one day wicketkeeper. We had Ian Healy as the Test wicketkeeper. So you have that rite of passage. Kind of like, okay, prove yourself. Yes, okay, the red ball is a bit more of a test. No pun intended, but I couldn't think of any other word. But it's a harder game to play because of you've got that 5 days. But kind of like, I get thrown back. You throw it back to England, but I'm going to show my age once more. I'm throwing it back to when we actually kind of had that one-day squad and Test squad. Steve Waugh was Test captain. Ricky Ponting might have been the one-day captain. And correct me if I'm wrong in saying that, but I think that's what we need. We've kind of half seen it at times, but I truly think in terms of our pace attack, we need that. In terms of our batting, it's a different game batting Test than it is one day and T20 especially. Give the batters who flourish one day, T20, give them the same. David Warner, he's been a great Australian cricketer. However, I'd be going stick to one or the other. Now, if he chooses one day, that's great.
I think he will eventually, but you got to remember he started as a white ball specialist.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Transition him. Okay, he plays the one day. He's going to be the one day specialist for another. He can do that for another year or two, surely, instead of just playing Test all the time. Marnus Labuschagne would be the one. I'd probably go kind of both because of he can play both really well. However, if he had to choose one, okay, goes over there. Glenn Maxwell, put him in the one day, make him a mainstay in the one day team.
Yeah, and it's really good that you say that, because I was going to say the biggest question mark for me, and I used to say it back after ball tampering when it didn't look like we had any, there's a serious lack of direction for me coming up into this World Cup. What's our direction? Where are we going? We've lost 5 straight games coming in, and not the same team hasn't played in any of those. And I'm just thinking, where's the direction? Maybe that's where we go. Maybe we get Mitch Marsh to captain. Maybe Pat doesn't play. We say, Pat, Hoff, Starkey, you're just playing the white stuff. In the whites, you're not playing in the colours. We pick some young guys to bowl pace for us. You maybe open with Dave. Inglis will keep. Carey won't keep. And then, you do it. And that's the other plus for it. Their workload is lessened. Maybe their paycheck is too. But it's whether they take that. At least there's direction there.
They can pick up their paycheck elsewhere. Like, that's the thing. I'm there going, I look back in the Gilchrist Healy era when, okay, obviously their paycheck wasn't as great, but I mean, if you're an Australian cricketer and you actually play it yourself, you play a few games, surely you can network to actually establish yourself post-career. So I think the excuse of paycheck, okay, go to the IPL for a few years after you retire from Test, do that. There's other avenues, but there's, I think, so much attention drawn to, you got to try and make as much money while you're young as possible to set yourself up post-career when you can retire at 30. Like David Warner can retire. He will have career options ready to go at the moment he retires. Ricky Ponting, you look where he's landed. You look at Steve Smith, where he can go commentary, he can go coaching, whatever. Michael Clark, he commentates. You look at all the established cricketers. Yes, okay, if you're in that next tier, where do you go? You got to try and make as much money as you can, but I'm sure, like, you create that network for yourself. Coaching post-career, there's money in it. I'm only obviously got to say, I'm speaking as someone who has no idea about this.
No,
I am not a cricketer. I'm going to say this. I could be totally wrong in all this.
I really do. I think, like you made the point a while ago when we came off the top with cricket, I think this summer, regardless of what happens in the World Cup, we test it. So if they're onto your plan, which I reckon is a really good one, it's one of 2 ways we can go. Give all the test quicks and our main bats, like Smudge, Dave, give them the whole summer in the whites and say you're not playing any of the coloured stuff. And then we give young guys a go. Spencer Johnson, Nathan Ellis, they can front the pace attack. Yeah. They're good enough. Spencer Johnson has real talent, real pace.
Give him a few games.
Perfect Stark replacement. Nathan Ellis has heaps of change-ups. Sean Abbott, he can come straight in
this
for Cam Green.
I don't want to see them, we'll chuck him in the 5 games before the World Cup. Yeah, let's see what it's like. I'm like, I don't want to see that. I want to go, okay, show me the squad you're going to play. Okay, if we lose close games, I don't mind. I want to see that consistency.
Yeah, and now you've even got batting options and keeping up. Inglis, he can play for Carey. We've just seen it. So give him a go in the summer. Play guys like, Travis Head's young enough to play both. He's one of the ones that can. He's that sort of batsman. But then you've got other guys. Give Rogers a go for Dave if you want to. Mitch Marsh can captain. Like I said, he might not play. He was great in England in the Ashes, but he might not play the Test series this summer. So let him assume the captaincy and take that young team in this summer and just see how much potential they really have. And if it works, and if it does, then we're well on our way. So, like I said before, it's really intriguing to see the direction they go in.
So considering this talk, I mean, we can talk for hours, which we could easily do, finding, just like the grand final, finding every little strand, who could, what ifs. But if we were to actually win this World Cup, would this be the greatest achievement, considering we're talking about this now like we're already going to get knocked out in the group stage? But, I mean, if we were to win...
Yep.
Yeah, hands down.
It's
It'll
not
be
close.
Unexpected. Let's put it that way, because
Backs to the wall, coming in well underdone in terms of health and consistency. To win your 6th in that fashion in India, I think it would never stop being talked about not just in this nation, but for every World Cup going on and every one-day game going on. Simply, it would be the most Australian sort of thing
I
ever.
was going to say that, yeah, because in England we were written off very early and we weren't going to be very good. A few changes. I know Warner and Smith just came up from their bans and stuff, but it'd be typical Australian, something like this, if we would have win this World Cup.
But we can't undersell it. It is absolutely mammoth if we are to do it. In India's backyard, in the form we're in at the moment, with not too much depth, yeah, to answer your question, Woodsy, it would be undisputably the greatest World Cup win in history, and it'd be the 6th, and I don't think anyone else has even got 5.
So we talk about, we spoke last week about the World Cup expectations, and we spoke in the Basketball World Cup as well. What's the expectation here?
I think
They're low at the moment.
Yeah?
cricket is its own beast. There's no sport like it because it is so conditions-based.
But we are so used to being successful. So the expectation of success, what you're telling me is that
we're the most successful one-day World Cup side.
But the expectation of success is not there for this World Cup.
No, it's there. I'm just saying it's not anywhere near as big as if we were playing in Australia or a likened country.
So how many games do we play for this World Cup?
I think you're pretty sure you play everybody.
You play everyone in the group stage, and then
How many?
I think it's top 4. Is it go through?
No, so how many in the group
I don't
stage?
think there's any pools. You just
How
play.
many
you
in the
play
group
everybody.
stage?
1, 2,
It's
3,
everyone.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games.
So you've got 9 games. So what's the pass mark then?
Well, the expectation for me,
wins.
you beat Bangladesh, you beat Afghanistan, you beat the Netherlands, and you beat Sri Lanka. You should. They had to qualify, so you should.
I reckon 4 wins.
And then you take. There might, for me, this is a bit 50-50, but you should take a game against South Africa and maybe New Zealand or, Pakistan potentially. If we took the main 4, the qualifiers, like I mentioned off the top, and then we took one from New Zealand or South Africa, it's pretty good. No one's going undefeated. India maybe.
So we can clip this up. No one's going undefeated. When India go undefeated or England go undefeated, you heard it.
Well, they have to play each other, so I doubt that happens.
Well, one of them could.
I just don't see anyone doing it outside of India, and even then,
Okay.
maybe it happens.
I'm tipping the Netherlands to get it done, I reckon. they're my smoky.
No, well, I'm interested because we always talk about the expectations of Australians in the World Cup, and I'm always intrigued because of there's just so much pressure that's put on the Australians, and so it's interesting to see. I haven't followed it as much, so hearing that there isn't actually that great of an expectation is okay. Well, the Indias, the Englands are going to be fighting it out in the final by the sounds of it. We'll find out in a few months' time. But, yeah.
So the tournament, at least the initial stage, I guess you could call it the home and away season of the World Cup, starts, like I said, next week, and it'll wrap up for us on the 11th of November against Bangladesh. But before all that, we've got a game against the hosts. It'll be in Chennai. It'll be absolutely packed to the rafters. They'll be loud. We'll be up against it. And that'll be next Sunday, the 8th of October at 7:30. Pretty nice start time. Probably isn't the best finishing time. It'll probably finish around 3 or 4 a.m. It'll be quite nice. So if you want to support us, that's when it'll start. I know I'll be watching at least to see the sort of 11 we go with and see what our chances are there. Hopefully Shubman's a bit nicer to us that time. But I can't wait. Any Cricket World Cup's just so great to watch. Obviously, the 2019 one is just one for the ages, the way that finished. Just remarkable in England. So it's been 4 years. We've had to wait. But the One Day World Cup returns next week. But back to the shores of Australia. And it's the other game they call footy, or rugby league. And the NRL is into its big dance. As Woodsy said off the top of the show, on Sunday, it'll be Penrith going for the three-peat. And what a dynasty that is. The Panthers taking on the Brisbane Broncos, who are back in the big dance. It's been a while. 2006 was the last time they took home the trophy. It's going to be a good one. Unfortunately, our Melbourne Storm couldn't quite get it done. They were a little bit underdone. The wheels sort of fell off in the end when that scoreless qualifying final and got into the prelim, but weren't really a match. Oh, did we lose the semi? Lost
We,
the semi.
no, we won the semi. So
No, we did win the semi. That's
Yeah.
right. We scored 4 points. Was it against the Panthers?
yeah,
Yeah.
38-4 against the Panthers, and Broncos getting it done against the Wars.
Yeah, up the Wars. Didn't
42
quite
to
go
12.
to plan, the Wars, but
But it's been a bit of a contrast to the AFL, where the AFL had the two teams outside of the top four make it to a prelim. It was kind of, the traditional sense of the top four made it to the prelim. They just swapped partners from the qualifying final. So it was Broncos, Panthers, Storm, and Warriors.
yeah, and that's sort of the way it was for most of the
Or
season.
Panthers, Broncos, I think
Yeah.
it was.
There was that separation for a lot of the season with, well, especially Penrith on top. Brisbane really came alive this season.
Penrith and Brisbane have been the benchmark all season, and I'll say Penrith have been the benchmark for the last 3-4 seasons. You've got to remember they actually lost to Melbourne Storm in the 2020.
Yeah, we won that one away from home.
And it was 26-20 Melbourne's way. Brisbane last big dance was a Queensland derby against North Queensland Cowboys. They lost 17-16. But you look at the scores leading into the grand final. So Brisbane beat Melbourne 26-0 in the qualifying. Panthers beat the Wars in 32-6. Then
it's like you said, it's just
38-4,
dominance, isn't it?
42-12, and it's just what's it gonna dish up on Sunday?
Well, I can't tell you what it's going to dish up. It's going to dish up some bloody good rugby. These two sides are as good as it gets in 2023. Obviously, Panthers going for 3 in a row, which first time anyone's ever done that, and it's so hard to do, especially for even a powerhouse like Penrith. It's so hard because teams always come at you and hit your level. And the Broncos have done that this season behind Reece Walsh, who's just been remarkable. The Warriors are pretty bummed that he left the club, but he's a young star.
I think he's going to be, if Brisbane are to win it, he's my pick for the Clive Churchill medal for best on ground.
And then on the other side, you've got the father-son, the Clearys, and they've really been the powerhouses behind this dynasty. And as much as we like to hate them as Storm fans because of what they've done to us since we beat them, you just got to take your hat off because they've got stars everywhere and they play exciting rugby. And when the Broncos run out there on Sunday, you got to fear them a little bit. It's just the way that their presence is. When you roll out to play Penrith, you fear them a tiny bit. But you mentioned Clive Churchill. I really like Brian Toto. I just really like him as a player. I think he's just exciting. He's built for a game like this.
Yeah. I will actually go back to what you said. It's the first. They're going for the first three-peat in NRL history. So that's since the competition was founded in 1998. I just want to give a bit of a history lesson. How many do you think is the greatest consecutive grand final wins? Just have a guess.
In NRL history?
In rugby league, Australian rugby league history.
Bit of a quiz without warning. I don't mind this at all. How long has it been around? Since you were born? About 100 years?
It's 1908, so just a little bit longer than I've been
a little
around.
bit before you. Jeez, wins in a row.
I'm going to base my answer off what Boxy says here, by the way, because I've got no idea.
5.
Yeah, what do you think?
I was going to say, I thought you were going to give me the answer there before. I was going to go 3.
Well, a team has actually won 5 in a row. South Sydney won 1925 to 1929. However, not even close. The team's won 11 in a row. I just thought how amazing when I was doing this research. From 1956 to 1966, St. George Dragons.
Oh, of course.
They were the definition of a dynasty. I think you as an AFL fan, you can't even fathom it. I think the
only man that could fathom it, and rest in peace to him, is the great Bill Russell and the Celtics.
There was a team that made a grand final every year in a decade, wasn't there? In the VFL back then, but
You're the historian, mate. You go. I'll let you cook.
I'll have to do some research and get back to you next week on that one. I've just said it, but I'm not sure if I'm right on that. But I'm there going, Penrith, like in the NRL sense, That's the closest. Like 3 in a row would be the closest. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I could be here in 12 months' time or somewhere else in 12 months' time saying, 4 in a row in an NRL thing is the closest you'll ever get to 11. But it's just amazing to see that this team that I'm there going, scratching my head when we played them and beat them was, how did we beat them? I
Yeah.
think Brisbane have to kind of look back and go, well, how do you beat a team that is almost unbeatable?
The good thing about Brisbane, and we mentioned Reece Walsh, they've got a few young, exciting players, and players like that thrive off a little bit of momentum. They can make some pretty exciting plays, so it could go either way. But we talked about Brisbane before. If they're to win the Lions, if they're to win, they go into the conversation of the best team in this era since 2000 in the AFL. I think if Penrith win this, like you're saying, they're probably almost undisputed the best NRL team just because of the weight of 3 straight premierships. The Storm have won their consecutive finals streak is pretty incredible. They're always around, so they can definitely be argued. They've won some premierships as well. But yeah, another really good. What a weekend it is of Australian domestic sport. It's just mega. So tune in to the AFL Grand Final at 2:30 on Saturday afternoon, and then, well, really, it starts with the AFLW on Friday. 5 games of that.
Thursday night with the AFLW.
Thursday
We
night
mentioned
even.
that, yeah.
So
We
make
did not mention
sure
that.
you're not doing a single thing this long weekend because you've got sport from Thursday night to Sunday night. And then you might even want to have Monday off as well because you might be celebrating your sporting bender. And I don't think there's any better time of the year to follow sport.
There's so much on, Boxy. It's quite remarkable. I mean, there's cricket on still. There's English Premier League on. It's all happening.
The cherry's in the middle of the bat right now. You cannot miss the middle of the stick, wherever you look. Something that has been missed, though, is the Wallabies in the Rugby Union World Cup. Woodsy, we were pretty high on them a couple of weeks ago. They couldn't quite pull out that Australian sort of comeback and fell to Wales. I don't really want to read the score. 6-40.
Yeah, well, it was it was a bit of a letdown. Once again, talking about the expectations and we're dropped down to 10th in the world now, so I guess the expectation was kind of like, okay, it'd be great if we made it out of the group stage, but playing Fiji, Wales, okay, maybe not the greatest pull to draw, but first time, as I mentioned last week, if we weren't to win against Wales, it's the first time in Rugby Union, sorry for that, Rugby Union World Cup history, we won't be making it out of the group stage into a quarter-final. So,
Tell you who is looking quite good. Ireland.
They beat South Africa, didn't they?
They've beaten the Springboks, which, mind you, is not hard to do, especially in this modern era where they've been so dominant. And I don't know if it's their Irish luck, but they've been elevated to world number 1, as you've researched here for me. Just remarkable. And that's the stuff you love to see. We saw it in the Basketball World Cup, where those European nations get over the top. We saw Lithuania get over the US, who's an absolute monster in the basketball world, always have been. Are we seeing the same sort of thing in rugby union at the moment with the taking over of Ireland?
You've got the traditional nations where, if I was to mention rugby union to you, how many nations could you actually name to go into? Oh yeah, they're up there in the top 10. Like, just have a guess.
For me, because I'm not a massive rugby fan, probably name 5 or 6.
Okay, I'll open it up.
There's that team that wears black, which I think everybody knows.
Okay,
Who are they?
I'll open that up. Can you name the top 10?
Can we do it together?
Yeah.
Well, no, Ireland's number 1.
Yeah, well, New Zealand.
Ireland, New Zealand, yep.
South Africa.
Yep.
England.
Yep.
France.
Yep.
Crikey. Wales.
Yep.
Australia's 10th, aren't we?
Yeah.
Australia 10. So you got
Crikey.
So how many we got?
Ireland, obviously, France, South Africa, New Zealand, England, and Wales, and Australia.
No,
So there's 3 other nations.
3 others. Something tells me they're European. Is one of them European?
One of them is, and only one of them.
It's not like Italy, is it?
Nah.
Argentina. I know
Argentina.
Argentina,
is one,
of
yes.
course.
Argentina,
Yep. If you're thinking of England and Wales and Ireland, Scotland, and you had a great spiel on this team.
Oh, Fiji. How could I
Yes.
forget?
You had a great spiel on them. So they're the top 10.
Love the Flying Fijians.
So there's 9 of them are above Australia. And, we faced Fiji and Wales. So
I mean, we love, like Australians, and I'm a very, very biased Australian supporter. I love us being on top of everyone in the world, but I just had to smile then because it's so good seeing these nations who aren't dominant in really anything jump us and be in the top 10 in rugby union. Yes, it's not a massive world sport, but I don't care. This is great. Sport has never been in a greater position for me around the world, every code, because any nation in any sport can come out and win a game and have the country just unite, and that's what it's about.
now I'm just going to put my head. I'm going for a different team now. Obviously, Australia knocked out. I'm just going to put my head. I'm going to put my green hat on, and go for Ireland. How amazing would it be to see Ireland win the Rugby Union World Cup? I mean, there will be Guinness flowing.
Nothing beats seeing Woody jump on a bandwagon, that's for sure.
Does it often.
I'm a Saints supporter, so I don't think I jump on bandwagons as
He
much
wore
as
the
other
Brisbane
people
scarf
think.
in today to the
And
studio.
I do believe he loves the Baggers when they were going to the finals as well.
I do
He's copping it. So we might move on from rugby union.
never be on the baggers bandwagon, I'll tell you that.
Because there's another code. This one is football, arguably the real football. Fish, you're a keen follower as part POM of the EPL. What's going on around there?
Yeah, so English Premier League, I'll just do the round review, I guess. So Ange Postecoglou, someone
What a
that's
man.
quite well known in this country, had his first North London derby, so Tottenham versus Arsenal. Let's go to the Emirates. 2-2 draw. Tottenham did come from behind twice in that game. Heung-min Son, the Spurs' new captain, scoring 2 goals. And new signing, arguably signing of the season so far, James Mattison from Leicester with 2 assists. Loves his dart celebration. His England teammate, Bukayo Saka, copied his celebration with his goal, which caused a little bit of banter. And I believe it was about 10 seconds after kickoff that James Mattison did turn Bukayo Saka like it was nothing. So a bit of banter between those two. Around the grounds as well, Luton Town received their first ever Premier League point in a 1-1 draw with Wolves at Kenilworth Road. So that's a fair feat for them because 10 years ago, they were in non-league football. So they've had quite some rise, Luton Town. I know it's well documented. Their ground isn't as superb as some like Old Trafford for you, Woodsy, but when you're going up the ranks that quickly, it's quite hard to keep on top of it all. And they've been in that ground for 100 years or so now.
Well, it's the one surrounded. The away stand. You have to go via houses,
But
don't you?
most of the old grounds are residential. So if I go to Blundell Park for Grimsby, you're surrounded by houses.
What div are they in?
Grimsby are in Division 4.
They're coming.
They're coming, but
So,
I'm saying it wasn't too long
10
ago.
years' time?
It wasn't so long ago that I remember going over there and seeing on the record, I've still got the record, from 2008, that Bournemouth were in Grimsby's division, in Division 4, and Luton Town were in Division 4. And now there's 2 of those sides in the Premier League. Which
So
is
you've got hope.
always got the hope for the mighty Grimsby Town Mariners.
It's great to see Ange doing so well, but
It
it's
is.
just great to see that sort of
Oh.
community aspect to the EPL.
100%. And other scores around the ground, Crystal Palace and Fulham had a 0-0 draw, which is, I guess they're 2 sides quite evenly balanced, and the result kind of proves that they'll be mid-table mediocrity this kind of season. I don't think they're going to push too high for Europe. I don't see them getting relegated. Roy Hodgson's probably one of the most experienced managers in the league. Over 70 years of age, Roy. It's quite remarkable. He's still going. And
He's got
In
fakes
Fakes
covered on.
territory. I was about to say in Fakes territory.
yeah, I know, but Roy's managed England, I believe. He's managed Liverpool. He's been around. He's quite remarkable the way he's still going about it.
Outstanding.
Manchester City, hard not to talk about these guys. I know it's hard
Give
for
him the
Woodsy.
cup already, right?
I don't think so yet, Woodsy. I don't think so. Because I was talking to stats soon, but they had a 2-0 win over Nottingham Forest. Might seem quite comfortable. But Rodri did receive a red card, and Forest dominated the second half, which is, for someone going to the Etihad, the empty had, if you like to call it.
I was about to say, how full is it?
I don't know how full it was, but
You'd have to go. I don't even care if you're a supporter or not. You have to go to watch that Haaland guy, right? Surely.
Erling Haaland did score a goal. I was going to say him and Phil Foden, 2 unbelievable talents in the Premier League coming, I guess, through the new ranks. I guess you see the Ronaldo Messi era is kind of over. Mbappe Haaland, or is Foden going to be that new player? I'm going to talk about your boys, Boxy.
Oh, you don't
Brentford.
have to.
Their home record before this weekend was phenomenal. They don't lose at home until they played Everton
Yeah.
in a 3-1
Oh,
loss.
Everton.
Yeah.
There's something about
Aren't
them.
Everton like going for relegation?
They are indeed, and that's what was quite surprising. And they've got a good manager in Sean Dyche who knows how to stay up. He did it with them last season But to get a 3-1 win, that's a massive win on the road for Everton. And I know it's so close down the bottom at the moment, but
I don't think they beat them last year either. I think there's something about it for Brentford.
it's quite tough. I'm now going to talk about your boys, Woodsy, Manchester United. It hasn't been the season to remember so far, but they're coming off a 1-0 win against Burnley. Bruno Fernandes with the goal, and I'm not sure if you guys might have seen the moment on social media where club legend Johnny Evans, he was on a short-term 6-month contract. They were interviewing each other for man of the match. Bruno Fernandes won player of the match and gave his trophy to Johnny Evans in front of the away supporters, and they all love Johnny Evans, club legend. Someone I think they need, the heart and soul of the club, getting back amongst the boys. A team that is flying under the radar, is something I'm going to touch on now, is Brighton. Now, people might not know this. They're playing Europa League, which is quite remarkable. They were a team that was in the Championship with Aston Villa in 2017, and they finished 5th last season. They're in Europa League, just literally Moneyball sort of situation. They are buying players for cheap, and they sold one of their midfielders to Chelsea, Caicedo, for £100 million. Now, I'm not sure if you're a Brighton supporter or if you like Brighton, but that is something special because they get talent like this Matoma from Japan. He's just tearing it up.
Oh, yeah.
He's the next player they're going to sell for £100 million, and they just keep replacing him. It's something that we're seeing with Brentford with Ivan Toney replacing Ollie Watkins, someone I'll touch on soon. But just these clubs find these gems, and for someone like Brighton, who currently sit 3rd in the Premier League, I know it's only 5-6 weeks in.
And Chelsea keep buying and it goes nowhere.
That's what I was going to touch on. So my boys Aston Villa love a good win when they win. So they beat Chelsea 1-0. Ollie Watkins, a lot of pressure's been on him because he was left out of the England squad. He was recently selected, and that's his first Premier League goal of the season. He did score a hat-trick in Europe. Villa now playing in the Conference League. Had to get that in.
So what did Coupe de Villa have to say about this?
A lot to say. Check out Coupe de Villa. Shout out to my Aston Villa podcast. But it's the first time Villa have won back-to-back games at Stamford Bridge since 1933. And for the first time I can remember, Chelsea are having an issue scoring goals. Now, if you guys remember, they had Didier Drogba. They had Diego Costa, Eden Hazard. They even had midfielders scoring goals like Frank Lampard. And they've spent so much money under new ownership. Roman Abramovich is probably looking at this thing, he got out at the best time because they have no European football this year. People really projected Chelsea to be quite high up due to they don't have any European football. They've got some amazing talents, but you can buy all the best players, and it just hasn't seemed to work out. And I don't know where they're going to find a goal scorer. They've got Nicholas Jackson from Villarreal, and Bournemouth pretty much had him signed last season. If Bournemouth were going to sign him, now Chelsea's got him. I don't know how you look at that. Bournemouth might have found a gem, but it's looking like they kind of missed out on a good one there. I'm going to quickly move on because there's a couple of games to still cover. One of them quite historical. Liverpool beat West Ham at Anfield. They were 1-0 down. Mo Salah, Diego Jota getting 2 of those goals there, which is quite phenomenal. West Ham, underrated side again. Europa Conference League champions, so now back in the Europa League this season. There's so many English teams playing in Europe, which is, again, something I haven't quite seen for a while, but you got your big, like the top 4 from last year playing in Europe, and then you have Brighton, West Ham, Liverpool in the Europa League this year, Villa in the Conference League. You know, there's a lot of spots up for grabs, and to see them back it up it's quite hard because they're playing Thursday, Sunday most of the time, these guys, and that's no easy feat. And the last game, Newcastle United, they must have been a bit angry or something because they put 8 past Sheffield United.
Hold on, 8.
8-0.
So who scored the trifecta?
No one scored the trifecta, Woodsy.
Who scored 2 goals?
No one scored 2 goals. There were 8 individual goal scorers, and for the first time in Premier League history, that's happened. It has happened in a game before, in a game in 2004 when Arsenal and Tottenham, the North London derby, had a 5-4 game. There were 8 individual goal scorers in that game, but that was in total. So this is the first time there were 8 individual goal scorers on a team.
If I got this correctly, Sheffield have been promoted.
Sheffield newly promoted side, yeah.
Welcome to the Premier League.
Exactly
Sheffield United.
that. Exactly
Wow.
that. And someone on a highlight Newcastle at the moment, they're playing Champions League football. The fans are unbelievable. Got new Saudi Arabian owners pumping money into the club. It's quite special, and they just absolutely destroyed poor Sheffield United, and we've seen Southampton lose 9-0 2 years in a row, but yeah.
So, yeah, that's incredible. 8 different goal scorers and I believe 9 different goal scorers for the game, but for one team having 8 is simply amazing.
There was 8 different goal scorers in the game.
Did the goalie even get involved? Or?
The goalie did not quite get involved, but
Surely he would have given him a
they
go.
never
If
let
they
off.
got to 10, then he would have.
That's like when you're just a bit annoyed on FIFA, so you just start up a real easy mode game
Exactly,
and get a bit of goalie run going. Wow.
It's something I don't think we'll ever see again, because normally they have someone score a hat-trick or score 2 goals, but that just proves what type of team Newcastle are at the moment. Everyone's bought in on their manager, Eddie Howe. Was favourite for the England job not too long ago, and he got sacked from Bournemouth, and it was all going pear-shaped for him, and he's come into Newcastle and just been absolutely outstanding. So I can quite see them going far there. Having a slowish start to the Premier League, this kind of will obviously kickstart them, you would hope, with an 8-0 win. But the top 6 I find quite interesting. So you got your 2 big dogs, 1 and 2, Man City and Liverpool.
Yep.
Brighton in 3rd. Ange Postecoglou's Spurs in 4th.
I like that spot.
They do like that spot a lot.
Yep, go on.
Arsenal in 5th. And my boys, Aston Villa, had to go to 6th. They're in 6th.
So where are United?
That's something they don't make the list. They're in the bottom half. Manchester United are 12th.
Expect them to be there, really.
And Chelsea are 14th. Now, these are 2 guys that are European champions, recently Premier League champions. United not since 2013, but they're still one of the biggest clubs in the league.
Where's Brentford?
Brentford, they're mid-table.
Yeah, we don't mind that spot. On top of United, where we should be.
Do. And, there are still 4 teams in the Premier League undefeated. Wow. Obviously, your 2 big guns in City and Liverpool. You got Mikel Arteta's Arsenal undefeated. And Ange Ball is not going anywhere because they have not lost under him, and he was obviously manager of the month for August.
Manager of the month. Congratulations to him.
I hate to say it, but I mean, if any team knocks off Manchester City, I want it to be Tottenham.
I think
just because of Ange. But then again, like, I'm conflicted because, the old how many trophies have you got, and that's kind of like, oh, do I want that to end? But it would be good to see Ange.
To see an Aussie climb the ranks of the biggest, one of the biggest football leagues in the world, pretty amazing stuff. Like, he's come so far, and everyone wrote him off going in. They're like, why have they chosen this guy, this Aussie bloke, really? And I watched that first game, I think I mentioned it last week, against the Bees, and it's so exciting. Like, win or lose, like, it's got me liking baseball, and I hate that, but I love it. Like, win or lose, they're just exciting to watch, the Spurs, and it's what they needed.
They're so fresh because they always go for a big boy manager. Jose Mourinho was one of the more recent ones of the bigger names, and it doesn't always work out. The big egos. Everyone loves Ange Postecoglou now. Like,
Connection's incredible.
I'm not sure if you've seen his press conference. He's funny, and everyone starts to buy in on that. He's also a nice guy. There was a Q&A session where the guy said, "That's it, no more questions." And there was a young guy with Down syndrome that was desperate to ask a question, and then said, "No, one more question." Points at him. Let's ask the question. It was about Ange. Pretty much saying how much he loves Ange. And he could have walked away, said, "No, I want to go. I'm only here for this amount of time." But had time for this little kid. And it just proves the pure class he is. People even ask him about Aussie rules in the press conference. Ange is a big Carlton fan. I'm not sure
Unfortunately,
if you heard this. This was the prelim week. And they asked him, would you be watching the Carlton-Brisbane game? And he goes, look, half these guys won't know what you're talking about. But yes, I will be. I hope Cripper and Vossi get up for the game. And that's something I find so funny is that the Aussie pressers over there can have a bit of a laugh with him and quite understand what he's quite going through.
Yeah, and hopefully Ange can get himself some trophies like we said before. And it's no wonder that Australian athletes are so loved and respected around the world because of the people they are. And wherever, I say athletes, obviously coaches as well, everyone in sport, if you're Australian, you represent the country so well because we just have that natural sporting spirit. And that's a great segue into my favourite segment of Aussies around the grounds. And this week I'm going to tip us off with another remarkable and unique college punting play by a player that keen Collingwood supporters might remember by the name of Flynn Appleby. He was on the list a couple of years ago. He was delisted in 2020, I think, but he played 11 games in their 2018 Grand Final run, and he's now playing for the Rutgers in college football. I can't remember the state that the Rutgers are in. Might be Utah. I might have to double check that one. But Flynn had a punt in their game against Michigan State, and it's been called the Aussie punt because usually, conventionally, if you don't follow NFL, the punter gets snapped the ball, so someone basically throws the ball to them, and they just stand and deliver because there's some, 200-pound gorillas running at them. There's big guys trying to rush at them and knock them over and grab the ball, which is something you really, really don't want. But for the Ruckers, Flynn Appleby, Ruckers is in New Jersey. There you go. He, instead of just taking the kick, he ran at those rushers. He ran around them, and he gained about 10 yards, and he just booted the thing. On the run, AFL style. You'd love to see it.
I want to see more of it, I guess.
And it went 75 yards, or 3/4 of the whole field, down the field, and trapped the other team inside the 10-yard line. And if you've been a keen follower of the show, when I give the stats of the NFL punters, a key stat for a punter is if you trap them inside the 20. So if you get the kick to land and stop bouncing inside the 20-yard line, you've done well. Well, Flynn, on the run, with rushers coming at him, was able to kick it 75 yards, and it landed at the 8-yard line of the opposition.
So I haven't actually
So
seen
he trapped
this.
them inside the 10. I'm sure we'll be able to get it, and hopefully we might be able to share it on socials or something like that. We'll see what we can do. But it was a remarkable play. It was just a heads-up play. He took off, showed the wheels, and showed his awesome kicking ability. It hit at about the 20 or 18-yard line and rolled on and rolled out of bounds, which is basically perfect.
So I haven't actually seen this. So when you're actually saying he punted for 75 yards, me being the NFL novice that I am, are you allowed to run punt beyond the scrimmage line?
I don't think so.
Okay, so
Yeah. I think Dicko tried that where he had the double punt last year. He tried to sort of run. I think usually what you see is when they are running near to or past the line of scrimmage, they usually just try and rush through. I think we saw Dustin Fletcher, the former bomber. He's got both his sons punting. One's at Arkansas, and then obviously Mason is at Cincinnati. And I'm pretty sure his younger son actually ran through the line and rushed for a first down. But yeah, it was just remarkable. It doesn't happen. So the Americans are going crazy, calling it the Aussie punt. For us, if you watch the players in Australian, just think, oh yeah, he's just played on and kicked it 50.
I've just been able to get a quick glimpse of it thanks to Noah. But I'm watching that and I'm there going, why aren't Americans doing the Australian style a bit more?
Yeah, well, they call it football, but they barely kick it. Which is interesting, but I love the sport, and that's where that sport's different as well, and they're going crazy for Flynn Appleby. So well done to him. He's my college star of the week. It was great to see that one. Unfortunately, the Ruckers did lose the game, but he did his job to the best of his ability, and it was great to see the Aussie punt, I guess. But
so that's the Rutgers Scarlet Knights.
Yes, very, very well-known university. They're not quite up the top flight at the moment, but he's doing quite well over there. And we'll chase that into a bit of NFL action where I've got to bring up my boy, Michael Dixon. He's doing it quite well. They played Carolina, my Seahawks. They got the win. They're second in a row on the season. And he was only required twice because the offense behind Geno Smith was doing quite well. And he averaged 46.5 yards on his 2 punts. Not quite his best day, but 93 yards on the day. And Mitch Wishnowski, a bit of a handful, but he's doing it beautifully for the undefeated San Francisco 49ers. He had 128 yards on 3 punts with a long of 46 yards. And our man, Lou Headley, he played for the New Orleans Saints, which unfortunately gave up about a 3-touchdown lead to the Green Bay Packers on the road. But he had 293 yards on 7 punts, so he was really in on the action. He had 2 inside the 20 as well for an average of 41 yards, so he's doing quite well. And Adam Gotsis, he had a really scintillating tackle in the Jacksonville Jaguars loss to the Houston Texans. He got out in the backfield and caused some havoc, the defensive lineman. So the Aussies in the NFL doing quite well there. No real news on the Sipos front. I think he's just sort of shopping himself at the moment, trying to find a contract.
See what happens.
Obviously, the Eagles got rid of him, and their head coach Nick Sirianni just said they wanted to go in a different direction, which is the business that international sport is sometimes.
It's sport in general.
But yeah, obviously another Aussie, Cameron Johnston, he's still coming back from injury. The Texans punter, and we've got the 2 linemen, offensive linemen in Falale and obviously Jordan Mailata, who's just doing brilliant. He is really, alongside Jason Kelsey, anchoring that Philadelphia Eagles offensive line, and the Eagles are humming this year. They're undefeated as well, coming off that Super Bowl run last year. So that's all from the American sport front. We've talked about the EPL, but I had to go to another sport here because there's some massive news in Formula One.
Your favourite sport here. Let's go. What is it?
The kid from Brighton, Oscar Piastri. He is a genuine rookie superstar. During the week, probably the biggest week of his life so far, the youngster, he signed a new deal with McLaren, made a bit of a meme about it. There was that fiasco with McLaren and Alpine who were fighting for him last year. And Alpine and McLaren had a bit of fun there, but he's staying with McLaren for a few more years. And then in qualifying, he got near seconds off Max Verstappen and started on the front row for the first time in his career. The first rookie to start on second place in the grid, if you're not a keen follower, since Lance Stroll did it in 2017. And on the first lap, he pushed the two-time reigning world champion to the brink, tried to sort of shove him into the wall and get past him. Not that he would shove him all the way into the wall, but he tried to push him to the inside and get past him. But Max was just too good. And eventually he was able to not only hold Oscar Piastri off, but Piastri's teammate, the Brit Lando Norris, was actually able to come around the outside and unfortunately capitalise on Oscar's ditch to try and get past Max. And Oscar gave up the position to his teammate on lap 1 and was actually never able to really get it back because Lando was able to get the optimal pit strategy. So unfortunately, Oscar never really got a shot at the win. Verstappen finished about 19 seconds ahead of Lando Norris in first, won the race for Red Bull, who became back-to-back Constructors' World Champions and won their 6th Constructors' World Championship in Suzuka in Japan. And Oscar, to cap off his remarkable week, got his first podium. He finished in third as a rookie. Pretty remarkable stuff. He's got all the tools. And if you ask me, he's going to be a world champion one day, the boy from Brighton, doing it absolutely brilliantly. And what a race that was. Lando Norris finished in second, so it was a McLaren 2 and 3. And they've had a great turnaround. After Oscar finished last, barely lasted 5 laps in his first race, he's come a long way and he's doing it brilliantly. So it's great to see. And next year, hold your hats, because we're going to have 2 Aussies on the grid. Daniel Ricciardo, currently nursing his broken wrist/hand, recovering from that. We haven't seen him racing in a few weeks, but he's signed a new deal. AFLW, they've offered him a 1-year deal for 2024. He'll race alongside the Japanese driver Yuki Tsunoda. So we'll have Danny Rick at least for another year, and what a time it'll be next year at Albert Park to see Daniel Ricciardo and Oscar Piastri getting down to business on the Albert Park track. And just a quick one, for the developing, I guess, phase of Formula One, women's Formula One, I guess, is taking a big step with Jessica Hawkins jumping into the Aston Martin and testing it during the week. It's a real step forward for women in F1, which I guess Formula One's one of those sports where it's a little bit behind in terms of, it obviously doesn't have its women's division, doesn't have too many, or has ever really had many women's drivers. But Jessica Hawkins is a real talent, and it's great to see that she got a drive, albeit it was a practice, but she shared that obviously testing drive with Drugovic, who's obviously their academy driver. And it's a real step forward to the Women's F1 Academy, which they're trying to build at the moment. At least Aston Martin's really taking steps towards that. So that was great to see. Although she's not an Aussie, it's great to see that those sports are taking those steps forward. So in terms of Aussies around the grounds for this week, that's about all I've got. But it was short and sharp, but it was really good and really positive stuff on the Aussies around the grounds front this week.
Well, it's exciting stuff, and I think that almost wraps it up. We've got the NBL kicking off this week. I think...
Well, Woodsy and Koch will be down to watch the Phoenix.
We play Melbourne United on Sunday. It's going to be a tough one. I can't see anybody getting past the Sydney Kings for the championship. However, strange things happen in sport, so we'll see what happens come the latter half. We'll start reviewing that, I guess, a few rounds in. Once we've got a real sort of a feel on who the teams
Yeah.
are. It's really hard to predict a sport like basketball.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. You mentioned the Kings, how they do without Xavier Cooks, who I'm pretty sure signed a deal in the NBA. Well, he definitely should be there. We saw him in the World Cup. But he was really dominant last season. I like New Zealand as well. They were good last season, and I've got to back my boys in. United. Dally's back. Hopefully we do a bit of damage with the great man from Maryborough. But that is all we have time for on the Extra Time podcast today. Thanks for coming in, Fish. Thanks for sitting in with us again. You've been awesome company as usual. Woodsy, thanks again, and we'll be all back into it next week. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you then.